And welcome, Mr. Kelley. Look at us.
Look at us.
Look at us in this space. I'm so
Amazing.
excited. It is amazing. And those who are just listening, they're like, what? What's so amazing? Well, I first of all, I'm gonna introduce you and do all the things. We're with Jonathan Kelley today, but Jonathan may just be my oldest friend that I will bring to
I'm
this
pretty
podcast.
old. I am pretty
You're
old.
not well, I don't mean the oldest as in his age. We're the same age. I mean, we go back the furthest probably than anyone, unless I bring a family member on.
Mm.
I don't know, because technically we have been friends since high school.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
GW.
GW, Denver, Colorado. GW stands for George Washington, those wondering. And it's just really cool to be able to, one, stay connected to people you've known for the majority of your life. It's a blessing. But then to watch them really bloom at this stage of life. And I have been Jonathan's friend through literally since ninth, 10th grade. So there's a lot of life that has gone by, a lot of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But you are doing something so unique. And I know sometimes I'll ask people to come on the podcast and they're like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm so sure because what I'm watching and what I'm seeing is some really inspiring stuff and I'm hoping that others hearing your story will feel just as inspired." So, before I dig into my first question and have everyone really hear your voice in this finding your voice after 40, I'm just going to read something super duper duper quick and then I'll ask you some questions after that. All right. Super duper quick. Jonathan Kelley is an experienced nonprofit organizer and the co founder of the Lawndale Pop Up Spot, a community museum in a shipping container at Love Blooms Here Plaza in North Lawndale, which is on the west side of Chicago. He has an undergraduate degree from Williams College and a master's in museum and exhibition studies from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Prior to his museum work, Jonathan worked in both the community organizing and anti censorship world, as well as at the American Library Association as a program officer and former program coordinator. So, you have been all about this community life. Tell me how it felt to just hear me read that to you.
It felt good. Yeah, ever since high school, but certainly starting in college and immediately afterwards. It's always felt like being engaged in community and working with community for a number of different causes has been a central calling of my life. Um,
Mhm.
I've only ever, except for the odd Kinko's job, or that's aging myself, but except for the odd Kinko's job or Wendy's, I've always worked in the nonprofit sphere, and it's kind of interesting for me because I don't really have any sense of what corporate world is like. The nonprofit that I worked at, the American Library Association, that was a larger nonprofit that had some corporate structures, but our incentives were very different. It wasn't profit driven as much as it was program driven or goal driven or what have you. So, I've always just thought of myself as just needing to exist in that space. Like I never even applied for a job really in the corporate world. It just never occurred to me, never felt right for me.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so we're going to peel back that onion a little bit because I think that's really rare, particularly our generation, where corporate life was kind of what was drilled in our heads to kind of you go to college for that. So, I'm going to take you back because the context that I know you is, obviously we mentioned high school, but I know you as a very creative, artistic person. And so that's me. Would you say, growing up, was that you a creative or was that just something you kind of did and we saw in high school? Who was Jonathan as a kid, as an adolescent?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been drawn to creative life. without being the most creative, generative person. So I loved, taking music lessons when I was a kid. I took piano lessons since second grade. That was it always felt right. But I wasn't like creating my own music. I wasn't doing jazz. I was doing like classical music that, the sheet music was in front of me and I would play it. And there's an expression to that. Obviously a skill and work and appreciation of the creativity. But like I said, if you asked me to write a jingle for the show, there's no chance that would happen. It would sound exactly like the McDonald's jingle because I would just steal that. So I've always been, and same with theater. So I got really involved in theater, and that's how we sort of connected was through Nancy Priest and Miss Williams
Yes.
at the UW theater department. But I wasn't out there trying to write my own plays or trying to write my own poetry. Really was out there trying to perform and be maybe a little bit on the stage. So I guess that, I have the appreciation for artistic creation and a love of bringing great creativity to groups, to people. And I think that might speak a little bit to, the work that I do now and the work that I've done for a long time is finding something that I'm passionate about, usually having there be a significant creative element to it and finding ways to be able to share that with the world.
Yeah. And I want people to tell their stories because I think that people assume, oh, well, you were this when you were this age. So then you kind of grew up and maybe you had a hiccup, but then you became the adult version of the thing you sought. And that's not at all, what happens. And yes, we met, doing theater together. And I think I probably got the most connected to you doing The Wiz because you were the student director, right, of The Wiz. So when we would do these musicals, Nancy Priest, the theater director, drama teacher, she always had a student director in addition to herself. And that's to teach those skills of theater, beyond. Of course, we're young, so I don't even know if we really, I kind of understood it. And it's like, okay, but that's when I got to know you. And what was crazy was I only really kind of understood you in that space as student director. But then you did a play. Was it, oh my God.
Ma Rainey's Black Bottom?
Yes. It was Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. And I was like, wait, what? Because I think you played the piano. I want to say you played the piano during that. And then on top of it, and I'm going to bring this up because I don't know how much I've ever talked to you about this. I think I brought it up a little bit, but this to me, in terms of finding your voice after 40, I'm curious to ask you a little more about you personally beyond just kind of our career and what we do. But I remember this and I want to bring this up and I hope it's not too sensitive or what have you. But when I saw you, I honestly, this is again, my 15, 14-year-old brain, I did not realize that you were African-American. I'm gonna be honest. I was like, oh, okay. That's Jonathan. Yeah. What? And you did this play and played this old Black man with this accent. And I was like, what? And I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I came up to you and I'm like, Jonathan, like, how did you like do that? How did you like emulate that? You're like, I'm Black. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, you kind of looked at me like, yeah, that's like my dad. Like, and I'll never forget that because it was like, oh my God, wait a minute. I totally misunderstood this person. So here I am misunderstanding. And I think our identities and who we are in terms of whether it's race, culture, gender, whatever, right now, we're just now beginning to talk about but me misidentifying you. Do you recall that? And has that been an experience of yours that in fact has influenced you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember that specific thing, but it's something that happened a lot and it continues to happen to this day, 2022. And I'm cool with it. And, it's been something that I've always try to work through more internally than trying to externalize it. Not that I'm not like talking about race or talking about my personal situation within larger racial constructs, but it's growing up, in particular, a large part of my youth before high school was in predominantly white schools, and predominantly white neighborhoods, although not exclusively. And most of my dad's family, as well as my mom's family, is in the Midwest, which is where I am now. But growing up in Denver, I didn't sort of have that extended Black family, right in my backyard. It was really more, we would take trips, and then my dad got a little separated from his family for a few years. He wasn't in contact with him all that often. And so, his adult friends, were of a wide variety, and you know how Denver is, it's a little bit more, I would say, less segregated and less isolated than that. So, I would have his friends, but most of them didn't have kids my age. So I only had here and there. So it wasn't until, middle school. I don't know how much I can curse here.
Oh, you can. No, go. It's
no, actually, she didn't curse. So I had there's this little girl when I was in sixth grade, and she was like, kept looking at me. She's like, "What are you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she was like, "Are you Mexican?" And I'm like, "No." It's like, "Are you Arab?" And I was like, "No." She's like, "Are you a Negro?"
Oh, wow.
This was in the 80s. Wow. Yeah. That was where she's at. At first remembering that, I thought she used the other word.
Yeah.
But no. Like, "Are you a Negro?" And I said, "No." I didn't claim that. And I was, because I was so I was living with my mom at the time in Portland, away from my dad. And I just, I felt like I was running away from something. And that was the only time anything like that I ever did that. I ever tried to hide who I was, that part of who I was. When I got to high school, I had conversation with my dad about you're going to be going to a predominantly Black school for the first time. Are you okay with that? He asked me. I'm like, of course, why wouldn't I be? He's like, it's just different dynamics. And I was like, okay. And then in high school, I had a very sort of mixed crowd of friends. And I was in the International Baccalaureate program, which was so insular and so its own thing. And all of our friends were each other for the most part, even if, even if we were involved in theater, a lot of the theater kids were also IB kids. So, and folks like, Ayana and Allegra and all these folks. Yeah, exactly. That became my social sphere. And so, but again, it was very, a lot of them were Park Hill kids, and that was an intentionally integrated neighborhood. And then once I got to college, identity sort of ramps up even further in college, certainly a lot more. And I made the decision to go to Williams, a predominantly white kind of elite school in the East. Certainly put African-American on my applications. I felt comfortable doing that, but they didn't give you a choice back then. It was one or the other. There was no multiracial category. And in fact, when I got to college, I co-founded this group called Students of Mixed Heritage, where it wasn't really about to be separate or to try to create a new category. It was really to allow a lot of us in the early 90s who maybe were living on these racial peripheries or questions of other people to work out unpack some of the trauma. And it's not like a deep trauma. It's not like that trauma of you've got to sit in the back of this bus or, but it's feeling like people are always looking at you weird. People are always asking questions that are harmless questions and good questions to ask, but in certain contexts can feel very alienating or very, very scary. So that was a lot to unpack.
No, I'm so glad you shared that, and I appreciate you because this is the thing. I think a lot of people make so many assumptions on so many things. And until we actually tell our stories, until we actually tell our experiences, those assumptions will just linger. And this is to me why, racism and, identity confusion and all of this exists, because we don't get to really hear people's actual stories. We hear a lot of stereotypes, we hear a lot of hearsay, we hear a lot of other people's assumptions about what that other person might have possibly been feeling, but so rarely do we actually hear from people, or do people get safe spaces to say, in fact, this happened to me. and this is what I did, this is what I didn't do. And I think it's important. I'm hoping that finding your voice, like this podcast, because this a lot of the work that I do when I'm coaching people, when I'm working with students, is identity development, and not identity development in this very traditional way, but in this let's hear more of your story, and let's unpack your story so that you can hear your story too.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we don't even get to hear our own story based in our own voice. Like, we kind of know the story based on the conditions that we were in, but to hear it in your own voice, I just really appreciate that, because I think I wanted to bring that to light, because what you are doing in current day, in the space and the demographics by which you're working, is an African American, space, and beyond an African American space, there's a lot of other layers going on in the community. So I wanted to give context, so I appreciate, no, that was perfect for me.
Thanks.
So, okay, so we're going through life. You mentioned about, college, going to kind of this elite environment. Did you see your life, like what you are doing now? Did you have any visions in your 20s or 30s doing the type of work that you're doing now?
No. So after college, I moved back to Denver, got involved in some community work and progressive spaces, and I found it to be really like I was carrying this load. Like I was, and I don't know if I knew I had a passion for it, but I don't know if in retrospect, if I was ready, like emotionally or what have you, to be doing the work. And I sort of burnt out on it within a couple of years really quickly. And, just traveled around the state a lot and tried to find my voice there. And I still had this interest in the arts. So at some point, I had this idea that I would become a screenwriter and maybe like a director, like an auteur, as we call it. Trying to write stories that might work out some of my issues, like really, really bad, but still like trying to like create something and then put it out there to the world. And through narrative, through visuals, through action, what have you. And so I applied to a film school for graduate school, got rejected. And then I was like, well, maybe I can try something in, just go to a larger city than Denver that actually has a film industry. And sort of like when I chose Williams, I don't want to ever make the completely obvious choice in life. So when going back to fifth grade, when it was time to choose, like I knew I wanted to be involved in the middle school orchestra, but I played piano. I didn't play like any of the orchestra instruments. So the music director was like, well, what would you like to learn? What do you want to play? And I was like, what are some options? And he said, there's clarinet, there's the trumpet, there's the oboe. And I was like, what's oboe? I've never heard of that. And he was like, it's the duck in Peter and the Wolf. And I was like, oh, I want to do that one. Nobody does that one, right? That's the one I want to do. So I ended up playing the oboe for like 9 years, the next 9 years, and really liking it. Played in like a city, like a small suburban orchestra in Denver. And
nice.
Anyway,
I don't think I did that. Okay.
Yeah. It was, I was better at the piano probably, but there's a lot of love in my heart for the oboe, just because it's a little weird.
Oboe is a beautiful one. I love the oboe.
Not when I played it.
I was gonna say, if you can really, David Ruckel at George was like the only person that I really knew who was so proficient in the oboe. He was super proficient in it, and always made it sound amazing. Yeah, it's easy to get pitchy.
Dog.
Yeah.
So where was it? So anyway, I was like, again, I don't want to move to LA. It seems so obvious and like pretentious. I don't want to move to New York. It seems like overwhelming. And but I know that Chicago has some semblance of a film industry. So that was a big reason why I ended up moving to Chicago in late 1998, which is where we were able to reconnect not too long after that, I think.
Right.
because it had been a few years. I think we saw each other at maybe a 5-year reunion or something.
Yeah. I think we saw each other at reunion, and I knew you were in Chicago, but I was living in DC. And then when I relocated to Chicago, I reached out because I'm like, I'm in Chicago. I need a friend. And I think that's when Ayana was still here. Kari was still here.
Yeah.
So yeah. Awesome.
So so I moved here. I tried to get like a couple of like, what do you call them? Like not extra, like production assistant roles or something like that. And I got one on like a really tiny, bad film, and tried to like befriend people and be like, how do you get involved? And I just felt like everybody was still very gatekeepy. Like they didn't want the competition.
It's a gatekeepy industry, but
yeah. And so it was pretty quickly that I realized I didn't want to do that, but I needed to get a job. So I was temping. I got this job at the American Library Association. I was like, it fits my skill set. I definitely can do data entry. I definitely can do, write letters and what have you. And I was like, I can be here for a couple of years, keep exploring this. And then 17 years later, I was still fucking at this organization that didn't allow me to like, I was in a huge rut.
Yeah.
I was just in this rut that I couldn't see my way out of it. For a number of different reasons. It was just like I didn't have the kick in the ass that I needed to take another step. So I know that's skipping over a huge part of my life.
This is no, you did awesome, because I wanted us to kind of get into what was the kick in the ass, like because this
I got fired. That's what it was.
Okay.
Almost literally kicked in the ass.
Literally,
she brought her boots that day.
But this is so that vulnerability of getting fired, and a lot of, I know a lot of people listening to this podcast are probably, when I'm looking at my analytics, it's looking like the majority of our audience is between 34 and 60. So we've got some people who are approaching 40, and then we've got those who are really in that 40s, 50s grind, and then, some above 60. But I know that I have friends right now who have been fired recently or who have been downsized. And, to have that happen, because I believe that happened while you were in your 40s. This is, And so to have gone to Williams and Mary, to have all of this life, and then to be at an organization for 17 years almost, and then to get fired, but maybe being a blessing in disguise for you, I guess. Was that the kick in the ass that was like, okay, I'm going to go do this tomorrow? Or did you still fumble in that and figuring the next moves?
There were two things that happened. So I got fired, which needed to happen. I have a little bit of begrudging, but not that much of a begrudging. And then right around the same time, a friend of mine had been diagnosed with brain cancer, and his wife was really, really close friend of mine. And but being able to sort of be untethered from that job, and I was able to take a little bit of money out of my 501, 401k. And
you do a lot of 501 work.
Yeah, exactly. 401, yeah. Just being able to like, just help out a little bit. They had a young son. Just take a little space to think, but also to have the realization of mortality, which I always think about, but that sort of it was really, really, really highly present. He ended up passing away, unfortunately, within not too long after that. But being able to be at the hospice and just help with some logistics, even sleep there for a couple of nights, and I don't think I've told this story either, but his parents worked in the museum world. And so I was like, I got to think of something to do. And I think that starting with getting fired and everything since then has been a lot of serendipity and a lot of a lot of forks and a lot of intentional decisions to say yes to an opportunity that's presented itself, or taking something that seems completely random and following that path. And I don't know how to articulate it quite, but so his parents were involved in museums. Me, think museums. Oh, you know what? I really like museums. What if I tried to learn how to do museums? So then I called somebody at Northwestern, which had a short a certificate program, and they were like, it's a good program, but I don't know all that you're going to get out of it if you're really looking to do a deep dive. What about the University of Illinois, Chicago? I looked at that. They seemed like kind of a really nice fit. So I said yes to that path. And then I got in, and then fall of 2016 is when my cohort started. The first day, even before the first day, I saw a poster in one of the lounges that said, take this class on incarceration and decarceration through the art department. And I was like, that sounds cool. I was listening to Making a Murderer, or I was watching Making a Murderer on Netflix. And I was like, oh, this is something about maybe I can do around wrongful convictions, and that can be my museum thing. So I took that class, and convinced my new friend Chelsea, who is also in my cohort, to take that class. And from that, we had a visitor within the first few weeks. And he was like, I've got this building in North Lawndale on the west side that I'd like to turn into some sort of presentation space or display space. And then I said, Chelsea, we could work on this project. This could be our thing. It's museum kind of related. We're in this art program, but maybe we could help him build this up. So we worked with him for a couple of years, and then a teacher, another class had this project to put some billboards up. And we were like, what if we put the billboard on the side of the building that we're working on? And so that became our first project. And then that project kind of fell through, literally it fell apart. A car ran into that building, which was already a mess. I was driving down the street. I had gone to this conference on museums, and this woman from Mexico City was talking about a huge failure in her life. And I'd already experienced some failure with my last job, but this was starting to feel like another project that was seeing failure. We couldn't get anything going. We didn't know if we wanted this to be our thing, or if we should just go live our lives and maybe try to get a job at the Field Museum or something. I don't know. Right. And then, but I was like, let me show you this mural that we created in one of our classes. I met the person after her presentation. So we were driving, and I went to show her the mural, and I couldn't see the mural as we were coming down 16th Street. And then I realized I couldn't see the building, and the building had been torn down. And one of the guys that we worked with happened to be right there talking with some friends. I was like, what happened to the building? It's like, yeah, they tore it down. It was in really bad shape. And I was like, this is another good thing, because not for our project, but it liberated us
from another serendipitous thing, right?
Very much so. It liberated us from this idea that a museum had to be in this brick and mortar space, that either we had to go into something that had already been built and fix it up and make it into something, or we had to build something from the ground up if we wanted to do this community museum on the West Side project idea. Because we'd already become really connected to and invested in a lot of amazing work happening in the North Lawndale area. It's for those people who don't know it, it's a really historically important neighborhood in Chicago. Martin Luther King in particular lived. I'm here now. I don't actually live in the neighborhood, but he set up residence here with his family when he was doing his Chicago Freedom Project in 1965, 1966. And he preached it he made a couple of the churches his home preaching base, and he got Mahalia Jackson to come sing at one of them. So he that history exists. There's incredible Jewish history from the neighborhood, and so I'm in currently the original Sears Tower, which before it moved downtown was based in North Lawndale, and this is where they made all the Sears catalogs and shipped them out around the world. So I knew nothing about North Lawndale before connecting with the first gentleman that I mentioned, but we'd gotten so excited about the work happening in the spirit of the neighborhood that after that building, one of our classmates had come up with this idea. Like I couldn't see. She was like, I can see that this building is taking a lot out of you and seems impossible to repair. Have you ever thought about a shipping container? And I had never thought about a shipping container. And I was like, what a good idea after that happened. So again, just taking other people's ideas. I don't write the ideas. I don't create them, but I'm happy to steal ideas or happy to perform ideas. So it's one thing to steal an idea. It's another thing to steal the idea and then do something with it and do something unique and cool and different and beautiful with it. And so that's what we're trying to do with the Lawndale Pop Up Spot is just buy a shipping container, paint it, put some flooring in, put some walls in, and then start coming up with wild ideas of how to make that a generative space for artists, for community members, for historians, for just people who want to be expressive in space and community.
Oh my gosh. So thank you so much for sharing and giving kind of the timeline on that. There's kind of a two-sided of this coin of hearing that story. One side obviously is just the rich community development aspect of that. And that makes me so excited because while I am not a community organizer, because I work in healing spaces and I know how, and again, with identity development, and I know how profound communities' impact is on those things, healing and development, it just excites me so much to see this, African-American neighborhood still being worked with and created with and museums. I think sometimes we lose sight of what the point of a museum is. You've studied now museum science and, curation and so forth. So you're in the belly of it. But I think a lot of people, just think of, the science, what is it? Science and industry. What is it? A museum of science and industry. And, we're going to go to the Shed Aquarium. And then, it's like, no. Museum is supposed to reflect the artifacts of the environment, of whatever environment or community. And so to create a museum in that space is so huge. And to do it from the lens of a creative or from an artistic lens, that so excites me because I just think that it's just so innovative and rich. You were about to say something.
Just that you said that museums are meant to reflect, and I think that's a huge role of museums. But one of the things that the program that we went through at University of Illinois at Chicago really stressed was the impact of museums and the potential impact of museums. So not just to serve as reflective, but to serve as change agents.
Yes.
One of our earliest texts was this thing called Museum is Soup Kitchen. So it talked about the idea of these, like a history museum or something like that. Like, okay, so you're reflecting, and meanwhile you've got homeless folks camped out a block away. Why do you think you're separate from that? Why do you think you're not part of the community that you're getting your tax money from or your visitor base from or what have? Like, why? What additional role, or how can you take this idea of being a cultural institution and making it about actual day-to-day lived experience of community? And that can be the case in Newport, Rhode Island, where everybody's really rich. One of my early dreams was I'm a huge tennis fan, and that's where the International Tennis Hall of Fame and Museum is. And I took a tour of that, and I was like, that's where I want to work. Actually, that was the main reason I went into museums. It wasn't to be a change agent. It was to be around like tennis history and to like be able to tell that story. But like, whether you're there, like, there's always a way that you can impact the world around you. And some communities have bigger or different or more like salient challenges than others. And I think every museum from the Accordion Museum in Superior, Wisconsin that I just went to the Met, should be thinking about how are we impactful? How are we non-extractive, but like we're not just like like if you remember the beginning of Black Panther, where Killmonger is like, no spoilers, but like going to see, like take these misappropriated artifacts and take them, for Wakanda or what have you.
Right.
There's that question of a lot of museums as to the degree to which they are reinforcing. I don't want to get into an entire museum studies class, but reinforcing hierarchies and power dynamics.
Yes.
And a lot of museums serve that purpose. Like if you go to, I was in Cuba. When I travel, I go to museums. It's like, don't work while you're vacationing, but I still love them. And so I was in Cuba and I went to their Museum of the Revolution, which they took the former president's grand palace and made it for the people, a free museum that, told the story of the Cuban Revolution and the impacts both then and now of their system. And in some ways, that is a museum doing the work of taking away this space of exploitation that they saw and turning it into a place for the people. But in a very real way, it's a space of propaganda and to reinforce the power dynamics that exist there.
Exactly.
So the more museums can question their roles in those power dynamics, the more that they can question their sort of place outside of, as opposed to integrated into the community. And
interesting.
I think that's how museums, and that's why also I felt it really important to call our space a museum. We don't collect artifacts. We're not a traditional museum by any means. We're really more of I almost want to say a gallery space. But I want the museum world to always be thinking more about how they can be in service to with community, not just to, but with community. And also like make sure that this community knows that we are providing a lot of functions of museums and that they can be proud to have a cultural institution like this in the community and make of it what they will. And then also like see how we can rethink musems to go beyond just what's inside the walls or some programs related to it. So we do, not during the winter, but during the spring and summer, we have a lot of events that are not even connected to our exhibition, but our cookouts, our free concerts, our festival days. And, we use the opportunities to show our stuff, but also to help out other people and just be one of many, many groups and organizations like trying to impact the neighborhood.
It's so progressive, and we're way past our time. I'm looking at my clock, and I'm like, but it's so interesting. No, but it's so interesting because it's so progressive and it's so innovative and it's so necessary. And I think in our spaces of, in our Indigenous and Black people and Brown people in these spaces, there's a certain level of, to me in my head, and I haven't studied, museum science, or curation of any of
it's not a science.
There's a colonialization also that comes along with museums.
In the imagination there is, but it doesn't have to be that.
And that's what I love about this space is you're still using the language of museum, but you're showing another part to it. We could go on and on, but we can't. Okay, so I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
How is Jonathan, now that you are doing such I think honestly it feels to me as your friend like a bit of a dream come true for you to be in this space doing this type of work, because you're merging so many parts of yourself to do it. So at this point of your life, what is it that you do to really take care of yourself just for you so that you have the bandwidth to keep moving in these spaces? And what are you most looking forward to? So those two things: how are you taking care of yourself, and what are you looking forward to?
So as you may know, I just turned 50 this year, so that's like a big deal. It's but I look it. a big thing that I've always done is, and I don't know if it's taking care of myself. It's just scratching an itch, which that's don't let that itch go unstretched. Yeah, and so I love traveling, and I love to even just do a little bit of exploration, even if it's a taco joint, in a neighborhood I haven't been to in Chicago, or if it's the trip that I just took that I think you saw a month-long trip.
Yes, a month-long trip.
Yeah. So I'm lucky to have a lot of freedom in my life right now, and that feels really good. And some of that has to do with saving things that I were able to save to and save up for and what have you. But so I would say like that month-long trip, or that trip to Cuba that I took that I mentioned, any of those. Like, I'm not the world's biggest traveler, but I do really like doing that sort of thing and trying to make that travel experience as offbeat as I can.
Yeah, I was about to say that it's the quirk in your travel. It's not even so much. I mean, if we're going to have in our show notes a way to follow Jonathan. And if you follow kind of, it's not, it's, you'll be like, why did you want to go to that place? But then the places you go within those cities or in those locations, I mean, Cuba is kind of an obvious one, but if you're in Wisconsin or in Minnesota or something like that, it's like,
the Accordion Museum.
But then the Accordion Museum pops up, So I think that quirk is the itch. Like to me, it feels like that's the thing that's making it really compelling. And interesting.
And I try to incorporate that into the work that we do at the pop-up spot. Is try to encourage the artists to find their own quirk. I mean, artists are already inherently quirky, but just think a little bit more. It's such a cliche, but outside the box or outside the container in our case, about like what will make this stick in people's heads and not have it be just another, I went to see another art show. Like, I saw something that I've never seen before and will never see again. And every community deserves that level of like special. And I'm not saying that we're the only folks in town or the only people providing that, but that thing that you bring out your uniqueness and that sort of thing. That's, I would say, to answer that question, that's sort of the main way that I pay attention to myself.
I love that.
Is through that. And then what was the other question?
What are you looking forward to at this stage of life? What I mean, this question. Is just you've only gotten halfway through. I mean, you may be a little beyond halfway. Just I'm a little beyond.
I'm a quarter of the way through. You don't even know. I'm gonna be on your podcast in 75 years, being like, man, I still have a lot to do. Yeah, we'll have all of these like cell regeneration figured out by then. Okay, what am I looking forward to? I'm looking forward to continuing on with this work. To one of the things that was a little tough for us, but also liberating, was that after our first exhibit in 2019, we had a big slate of exhibits planned for 2020, and the pandemic messed with that a lot. But we adjusted. But one of the things we've always been trying to do is find out ways that we can do truly community curated work. So not just me as curator finding a community member who's an artist and putting on a show, but working with people from all ages, not just youth, because youth is the obvious one, sort of, and a very important one, but people of all ages, because 60-year-olds can bring enthusiasm these days more than a lot of high schoolers or whatever, and generative ideas and wishes for their neighborhood and their community. So working with multi-generational groups and cohorts within North Lawndale to have them do the work of running this museum and other museums. So really, our big summer project is called Your Exhibit Here. Everything about it is going to be of, by, and for the community. only going to provide some tools in terms of bringing in experts on curation or writing for museums or what have you. But these groups of young people and older people are going to work together to come up with the idea for the exhibit, to write out the plan for it, to come up with the design, marketing, promotion, and all the programs related to it. So we're going to kick that off early in 2023. We're extremely excited about it. We're still looking for a little bit of funding. So if any of your listeners have
I was
extremely
just gonna say this was gonna. I don't want to leave without people being able. It'll be in our show notes, but please share how people can. One, follow on social media, whichever, if it's Lawndale Pop Up, or if it's you, whichever is best. And also, the website where people can go to donate or to support, volunteer, all the good things that we want to do to keep it alive and moving and growing. So
So following Lawndale Pop Up Spot is easy. It's Lawndale Pop Up Spot, all one word, .org on the web, regular on Facebook, regular on Instagram, and then you can donate also on our website, lawndalePopUpSpot.org, and then just follow me on Instagram if you're really excited about my travels. I'm at Jonathan M. Kelley on Instagram.
And make sure you guys look at the spelling, because his Kelly is with the EY, not just a Y. And his Jonathan is Jonathan. There's a lot of different spellings of your name.
There sure are. No one, even my parents don't get it right 100% of the time. No, I'm kidding.
I miss it. So I'm like, what is it? I'm like, no, I got it now. I got it. All right. Last thing, I promise. Theme song. What's a song that motivates you that, I know. We have a playlist that by the time your episode airs, this playlist should be out. But yes.
Oh, man.
And I know that's hard for someone who loves music. And maybe this week, maybe it just pops up in your head right now.
Well, the one that my sort of energy song is Uptown Funk. You can't listen to that song and not start getting a little bit ready to go, a little bit hyped up, But really, also I'm old school, so anything Stevie Wonder or Elton John are my two great artists. I could listen to literally every second of every day forever and never get tired of it. So anything by those two. But if you're talking about getting the blood moving, getting pumped up, let's get this. It's gonna be Uptown Funk. It's just such a fun song.
It is a fun song. It's a really fun song, and so we will include it in the playlist. It'll be a Spotify playlist. Well, this has been wonderful. We are going to continue our conversation for just a few more moments as a bonus on video. By the time this airs, we will be releasing our videos on YouTube. So right now in our pre-recording stage, it's kind of private on Patreon, and we'll probably have some certain bonus things only on Patreon, but we want you guys to hop on over to YouTube as well. So this is it, but this has been amazing. Thank you so much. Do not jump off yet. Okay. I'm just going to ending it for our listeners on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, but I'm so super excited for you and proud of you for finding your voice, for finding this. And
thanks. Really, you too, Kenya. For real, extremely proud of you. This is a wonderful, beautiful effort, and I'm very proud of you as well.
Thank you. I'm always changing. I'm a chameleon. So, but I too want to get really involved. I want to make sure I can get involved with Lawndale Pop Up Spot for sure. So yes. All right, listeners, we will be back next week. Those who are staying tuned for the bonus, we will see you in a moment. Talk to you guys soon. Okay, bonus time. Now, this is going to be a quick bonus, only because it was just so interesting hearing everything you had to say. So I didn't want to interrupt that flow because it was really, really compelling. But for that person who heard your story and who, let's say it's I want to create something like that in my community. That sounded so super inspiring. Any tips? It's for someone who may want to get more involved with community, in a more creative lens.
Yeah.
What would you suggest?
So definitely follow your own bliss. And I know that seems like everybody's ever said, but like say yes to the things that feel right, and do some exploration of things that you might have thought about doing, or when I said say yes to opportunity, the serendipity part has been nonstop, like how we've kept going, like, and it happens in the weirdest of ways, and just finding ways to say yes and try things out, and not everything's going to work, and that's okay. And then, again, I'm just a shameless thief. I try to see what's working in other places and just take those ideas and try to, integrate it. And again, try it on. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But like, and don't try not to limit yourself to what you think, what you imagine other people might enjoy. Like, it's so easy to try to again, kind of get into it because you think people are only going to like this way of doing things, or this type of art, or this type of music. Like, people love beauty. They love new things, and they love being able to, and a lot of times it's just not having the opportunity to go and explore. And like, not everybody can, afford to take a month off and travel. So finding ways that you can do that travel, in Chicago, try out
in your neighborhood,
or the neighborhood next to you. Right.
Yes. I always tell people that. I tell my kids that. I'm like, there's so much to explore right here, especially being in Chicago, that you don't even know. But
so just explore, and at least once a month, just try to find something that you haven't done before, and feel free to do it by yourself. That's the other thing. I'm kind of like, I love hanging out with my friends and my partner and all this, but like finding, not being afraid to go to that jazz club by yourself, and just sort of have that, experience. And the nice thing about that is that you don't have to have that like to the death fight with the other person about what you're going to do that night.
Oh my God. I just
like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do you want to do?
What do you want to do?
Oh my God.
I
saw a meme with these two women holding guns at each other. What do you want for dinner? I don't know. What do you want for dinner? Like, it can be exhausting. You don't have to do, I mean, sometimes you're like, I can't decide. But
it's still just your decision. That was probably one of the most profound things that I intellectually maybe knew, but did not really experience until, I just went to Colombia for 10 days by myself. And I'm like, oh my God, there was no chance of an argument. There was no chance of conflict. Like, I could change my mind 12 times and it was fine. Like, I didn't have to be worried about what the other, So that's a huge, that was something I actually talked about on a previous episode, how important that is to be able to do things with yourself, where you're not negotiating, potential conflict or whatever. So I love it. I love it. All right. Last question, and then I'm going to let you go. What is something I did not ask you that you wish I would have asked, or just something that you want people to know about you?
Gosh. So you didn't ask me to sing. No, I'm kidding.
Go for it.
Yeah, right. I don't know. What is something? Let's see. So I guess the one thing that I sort of touched on a little bit, but not fully, is that while we like to explore and try different projects out and do unique things, we are very much try to take direct, we want to lead, but we also want to take direction from the community. And so we not only, when this was from Chelsea, actually, Chelsea Ridley, my co-founder, when we first, in 2016, when we first started getting involved, it was a little bit, serendipitous that North Lawndale was embarking on this project to do a quality of life plan, to take 12 different areas and create metrics and try to improve on these metrics. And they were allowing anybody to participate in that process, whether you were a resident or a business owner or work for a nonprofit or what. So we just like, why not us? So Chelsea started going to some meetings. I started going to some meetings. That's how we started meeting people really, who were already engaged folks, not just like anybody who was on the corner, but like people who had lived in the community for decades and had their own visions for how they wanted to improve their own community and do so in a exploitive, non-displacing, not like trying to make this neighborhood something that it's not, but trying to make it be the best of itself that it can be. And North Lawndale's faced this like incredible exodus of Black people in the last 50 years, and a lot of the west side of Chicago, a lot of Chicago has, and a lot of young people you talk to are like, it's about survival. Like the reason we leave is to escape, the worst of, to be able to make it out alive even. So keeping all that stuff in mind, we've worked very hard to stay connected to the principles of the quality of life plan that ended up coming out of this process, and to work within the structures that were produced by this process to make sure that we are always accountable to other people, connected to other people, and not trying to feel like we are the ones with the answers, but we can bring ideas to the table that help build on this process that has been sort of internally, propagated. So yeah.
I love that. We have to stay in deep touch because my brain, I'm like in the summer months, I have more flexibility. So I really.
Not to belabor this, but taking care, we shut down for a few months, in part because we don't have central heating and nobody wants to be in a 20-degree museum. But finding that time, a garden has cycles, right? And in the winter, it's time to sort of hibernate, and also, but that's a very generative time. That's actually the most generative time for a garden. Stuff that's going on in the soil and underground, under the frost or whatever, will then bloom in the spring. And so finding that time to not rest per se, but take a breather, revisit things, not feel like you have to do program, always be engaged, always bring something, because you'll be around in the spring, and that you'll have these amazing artists and programs and events and new relationships that you're building, come to really, not to push the metaphor too far, but to really flower and find that expression.
Yeah. I love it. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your enthusiasm, as well as just the knowledge. I just think that, you've given a lot of food for thought for people to consider, not only just their own kind of desires and their own kind of quirks and the spaces that maybe they've not thought about, going into, but hearing you not only go into it, but use serendipity for such a tremendous, momentous kind of space. I just really appreciate that, because that's what I was hoping that would be brought out. So I thank you.
You did a great job.
No, you did. I just facilitate. I'm a facilitator. So
that's a big thing.
So, all right. So those who are watching, we're going to end the recording. Jonathan, you stay just 1 second more, because I'll show you how to get off the camera. But for those watching, we'll see you again next week. Guys, take care. All right. Bye.